Capitol Hoops today, continuing our series Beyond the X's and O's. We're with Gwynn Park head coach Mike Glick. Coach Glick, it's a pleasure being with you today, and we look forward to learning a little bit more about you and your history and kind of your basketball DNA.
I appreciate you coming over and spending some time in my home and interviewing me, Mark.
Yes, sir! Mark, major heart.
So first off, Mike, give me a little background on yourself. I know you grew up in the DMV.
Mm-hmm.
You've been coaching basketball for quite a while now. Got a couple W's under your belt. But give me a little background on Mike Glick.
Sure. I'm born and raised in the DMV, Montgomery County product. Born and raised in Rockville, the Aspen Hills section. 1984, last class of Robert E. Perry High School.
There's been a lot of basketball coaches in the area that went to Perry, is that right?
Yes, Paul Forringer, Dan Harwood both went to Perry. Perry was at one time a perennial power in all the sports in Montgomery County, but then when the population shifted, kind of moved up to the northern end of the county, they decided to shut our school down, and it's a big loss, but we still have a lot of reunions and we all get together with each other.
So continue with your background a little bit. What sports did you play at Robert E. Perry, and what did you do after Robert E. Perry?
Yeah, in high school, I played all sports growing up, like everybody in my generation. And in high school, my main focus was basketball. So I played 3 years of basketball at Perry. And believe it or not, I was on the golf team for 3 years at Perry. I was also editor-in-chief of my high school newspaper, the Midnight Sun. But my main focus at that time was basketball.
And after Robert E. Perry?
Ended up attending St. Mary's College in Southern Maryland. What a tremendous experience. Probably the best 4 years of my life. I loved it down there. So I was a 4-year player in the basketball program. I also played baseball. Walked on and made the baseball team my junior and senior year.
And what was your basketball playing career like? Were you a good player, an average player? What type of player were you? What type of impact did you make? What was your game like?
I was a D3 player, so I think I was an above average player, and by no means a great player, but I was blessed to have played with and against some tremendous players, and basketball was my life. We had a good team at St. Mary's. What really changed my career, I was always kind of a slow-footed player, really intelligent. I could shoot the ball from the outside, and I'm going to date myself here. The three-point line came into effect my junior year in college.
Wow.
So that kind of changed my game, and my junior and senior year, being able to play with the three-point line really helped me as a player. Wish I would have had it my whole career, but it just wasn't around in that day and age of the four-corner offense.
So when in your life did you think basketball coaching is something that I want to think about pursuing?
Yeah, I would say probably from a very young age. Basketball, in many regards, saved my life.
Why do you say that?
I just think it kept me off the streets. It kept me out of trouble, kept me away from drugs and alcohol. And I really, really think I had some very influential coaches growing up that steered me down the right path. I was an only child with a lot of idle time, and basketball took up my time. And some of my best friends in life, I've met through basketball. In my high school yearbook, my senior year, it said, "Where will you be in 10 years?" And I said, "Coaching basketball."
Wow.
I knew I wasn't ever going to be a professional.
Right.
I knew that just because I wasn't good enough, but I loved the game. So I knew I wanted to coach. I actually, through high school, coached all through high school, rec department basketball at 4th and 5th grade level. And my dad actually was the, quote, head coach, and I was the assistant. But, I ended up running all the practices, and I ended up winning the county championship my junior and senior year in high school with a 4th and 5th grade team. So that was kind of the start of my career, and I just had a passion for it ever since. So I was a 1988 graduate from St. Mary's, and small college player, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to go get a big-time Division I job or anything like that. So I just hunted around, and I put my resume in at Montgomery College, Germantown, and the head coach, Steve Hobson, legendary coach, Montgomery County product, Walter Johnson product. He actually coached at your alma mater, BCC, for a little bit. He hired me, and I owe everything of my coaching career to Steve Hobson, because without him, I would have never gotten my start in basketball. And I was at Montgomery College from 1988 to 1990.
So 1990 comes around. What's next after that?
1990 comes around. I was a recruiter when I was at Montgomery College, Germantown, and I beat the bushes and recruited some tremendous players Probably Jerome Williams, Adam Magruder was probably the top player that we recruited and got to come to Montgomery College. And we had a lot of success, and we ended up going to the first ever region championship and won our district. So I went from there to, at that time was Columbia Union College, which is now Washington Adventist. And at that time, we were an NAIA school, kind of like Division II, and with full scholarships. And I was assistant athletic director, head JV coach, #1 assistant for the men's varsity at Columbia Union. And I was there for 3 years.
So 3 years, and after that?
And then after that, I got the break of my life. And I became at 27 years old, the head coach in 1993 at St. Vincent Pallotti, which was just then entering the WCAC. And my old high school principal, Dr. Richard Dumais, hired me and gave me my start as a basketball coach and also as a teacher. So I'm entering my 25th year as a varsity head coach and as a high school teacher. So I've been a teacher all 25 years also.
I know Pallotti was a huge opportunity for you at a young age, and you got some amazing talent there and really kind of took the DMV by storm, taking a team kind of from obscurity to, relevance, to say the least.
That was a really fun time. Some of my fondest memories with coaching came from that time period. And right place, right time, definitely. First of all, I had unbelievable staff. Russell Davis and Josh Pratt were my two assistants at that time. Tommy Von Stein, Timothy Hill, and we went out and just recruited, and we were able to just get some amazing people and amazing players come to Pallotti that had never attended a school like that before or since. We were able to, all of a sudden make a impact on the basketball landscape. Personally, I think the reason that I've been so successful in my coaching career was the opportunity that I had at such a young age to coach against just legendary coaches. From Morgan Wooten at DeMatha, to Dick Myers at Gonzaga, to Carol Holmes, at Carroll. Bob Wagner was at St. John's. Joe McCall was at Good Counsel. Derek Campbell was at McNamara. Just some unbelievable coaches that I got to coach against. And it taught me a hell of a lot at a very, very young age in coaching. And I was able to make a lot of mistakes along the way and become a better coach because of it.
We'll get a little bit more into this later, but the recruiting aspect was huge. I know recruiting wasn't as big back then as it is now. But talk to me a little bit about, you get the job there. Mm-hmm. They enter the WCAC that same year. Obviously, the competition level is going to skyrocket, and there's a lot of pressure on you to field a competitive team, and you accomplished that goal. Talk about that.
Well, I think that I was a young coach, and we had a young staff, and I think at that time a lot of players were attracted to that. We gave players a chance to come and showcase themselves and not have to worry about being recruited over. At that time, it was a lot different. There weren't as many private schools, and a lot of the talent tended to be in a few number of schools. So I think we presented, the players and the parents with an avenue where they come showcase their children and have a great academic and play in a great environment and become excellent college players. And it all worked out for just about all of the players. And I was blessed at that time to be at Pallotti and to coach so many great players. And I love Pallotti. I really did. It was some really, really great times there.
Before we get on to your next stop, quickly tell me who some of the top players that people would kind of recognize the names of while you were at Pallotti.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably our best team was our 98 team. And that 98 team, we ended up losing to DeMatha by 1 in the WCAC finals and had some epic games against DeMatha. But, everybody on that team was a tremendous player. But David Morris was probably the linchpin to that team and our recruitment. A lot of our players came through the Blue Devils AAU program at that time. Them and Assault were the top 2 programs. And Rob Jackson and Steve Turner were the coaches. So we were able to get 4 or 5 Blue Devils. And David Morris, we called him Day Day at that time, was the best point guard in the area. And when he made the decision to come to Pallotti, that really opened up a lot of people's eyes, and a lot of people followed. One being Rick Smith, who Rick just had a child, and I'm proud of him for that. Rick ended up having an outstanding career, and he ended up playing 4 years at Marist College. Nate Green, who ended up playing more than 8 years professionally, was our 6'6" power forward, and he was an unbelievable left-handed player and ended up playing at Dayton. We had a 6'11" center named Kenny Whitehead. That was a tremendous player, very good defensive player that ended up playing 4 years at UNC Charlotte. We had Austin Rolen, who grew up right across the street from DeMatha, who ended up coming to Pilati, and he ended up being a great player at Delaware and then starring at Lehigh his senior year and actually as an assistant coach at Lehigh. Now we had a backup center named Matt Bishop, who was a very, very versatile two-way player. Actually, Jason Bishop from the Sports Junkies brother. We had a guy named Heath Kurlock who ended up going to the United States Naval Academy. That was a very, very athletic kid. And the last kid was a guy named Toussaint Crawford, who also was a Blue Devil, who now is a very, very prominent dentist in our area.
Gotcha. So, Pilati ends. You end up at Spalding. Before we get into Spalding, tell me a little bit about that transition. Why you were having a lot of success at Pilati? Why did it end?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't leave out a lot. Some people. 1999 was my last year at Pilati, and we were blessed to coach Jarrett Jack, who ended up playing more than 11 years in the NBA, and the national championship game at Georgia Tech was on that team. A guy named Levi Watkins, who ended up playing at NC State and was an assistant there, and now is at Arizona State, and a kid named Khalif Watson, who ended up being a two-year starter at Miami. So I had tremendous players in 1999. The school wanted to go in a different direction in terms of athletics. It was tough for them to compete with 450 students in the WCAC, so they made a decision to go to the MIAA, Baltimore-based league, and I think a lot of the players and myself didn't want to go in that direction. So I left on good terms with Pilati, and then I was blessed to be hired within months at Archbishop Spalding, which competed in the Baltimore Catholic League.
So you get to Spalding. How is that when you inherit that roster, that situation? How is Spalding basketball looking at that point?
Spalding basketball was excellent. Tony Martin was the head coach at Spalding. He had won the Baltimore Catholic League championship in '99 with pretty much mostly all juniors. So you come
into a situation where you have a big senior class who's the reigning champions?
Yeah, and I had been blessed enough to have coached against Spalding at my first few years at Pilati, and Lee Dove was the head coach then, and then Lee Dove became the athletic director at Spalding. So Lee and I had a good relationship, and Lee knew a lot about me as a coach, and I was offered the position and accepted in a second, and I walked into a gold mine. I mean, even I couldn't have messed that up. We were preseason 13th ranked in the USA Today, and we had a team in which all 5 starters returned from a team that had won the championship.
So tell me about your tenure there.
Oh, great years. Was there for 7 years. A lot of people ask me what was my favorite team of all times to coach, and there's a lot of favorite teams to coach, but I would have to say just the class of 2000. My first year at Spalding was probably my favorite team I ever coached.
Who was on that team?
That team had a lot of really good players, but our star player was Derek Snowden. An unbelievable player, and if he didn't get a knee injury his senior year at Villanova, would definitely had a long professional career. Tremayne Robinson was a dunking machine. Was an unbelievable player. It was a Towson commit. Was on that team. We had a guy named Darren Batman Johnson, who was a great football player. He was an intangible factor. Was on that team. We had Isaac Brooks on that team. Maryland Eastern Shore commit. It was a tremendous team, but that team bonded together and bonded with me and our staff like no other team I've had. And we just had a magical run and won the MIAA and Baltimore Catholic League championship that year.
So in the 7 years you were there, how many championships did you guys win? Were there any down years? Was every year a great year? Tell me a little bit about the makeup of it.
I'd probably say the only down year we had was probably my last year in 2007, but we had a lot of really good young players. 2006, but we had a lot of really good young players. So I think the future was going to be bright. But other than that, there were no down years. We won 2 Baltimore Catholic League championships. We played in 4 Baltimore Catholic League championship finals. Lost a couple times to Mount St. Joe's and Pat Clatchy. We also won 3 MIAA championships. At that time, the league was a little different. We had MIAA, and then you had Catholic League. But I mean, we had some tremendous players in that league. From Carmelo Anthony to Dante Green to Will Thomas to Brian Johnson, some great players. I loved my times at Spalding and coaching against everybody in the Baltimore Catholic League.
So you leave Spalding and go to Gwynn Park. Again, you leave a great situation. It seems that way on paper, at least. But you leave a great team where you had a lot of success. Again, why do you leave?
Well, I think various reasons. I think the number one reason for me was my children were getting older. All the coaches that are watching this know in the private school what the grind is of recruiting. It's probably the thing we hate most as private school coaches. So the recruiting was really taking its toll. And my children were getting older and they were playing sports. And I didn't want to miss the opportunity to watch my kids play sports. Two of my children are, baseball kids, and so I was doing the whole travel baseball thing. So being a public school coach really helped me in terms of the recruitment side of things, and not having to spend every weekend in a gym recruiting somebody else's kid. I could actually go watch my kid play.
Before we get to present day at Gwynn Park, tell me a little bit about your camp and about coaching camps throughout the year. I know you coached with Morgan Wooten at their camp, and you've built a pretty darn successful camp on your own.
The first thing I would say, I'm from a generation where if you were a young coach and you were an aspiring coach, you went and you worked camps. So when I was in my, 22 to 27 period, I worked every camp under the sun, from Morgan Wooten's camp to the 5-star camps to Rob Kennedy's hoop group camps. I worked Dean Smith's camp. I worked every camp under the sun. And I think it's a tremendous way to network yourself and to learn from others. So anybody watching this that's a young coach, I would just stress, go attend camps and clinics. It's the number one way you can advance your career. Then, in the late 90s, I thought it was time for me to get into running camps. And I ran a couple camps, when I was at Pilates, smaller type camps. And then I went to Spalding. Was when I really started focusing on running camps, and we had some tremendous camps at Spalding, and we've continued that at Gwynn Park. And nothing makes me feel better than when I walk into a place and somebody's 30 years old and they're waiting on me and they're like.
So you headed to Gwynn Park, public school, your first public school job. Tell me about the transition going to Gwynn Park.
Oh wow! I went to your basketball camp back in 2001. It's humbling, but it's a chance to really keep yourself young, to be honest with you. I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, I've been a teacher for 25 years, so I'm used to working with kids, but in the camp setting, it's just fun to work with kids in a different environment. And, it's also a blessing for me to have a lot of my former players come back and work on my staff, even to this day. And it's just great to see them, as coaches and role models, teaching kids at camp. And I've been blessed, just been in the camp scene for a long time, and hopefully you can want to continue running camps.
Tell me a little bit about how the camp works. How many sessions are there? How many campers? How many counselors? How does that work?
Well, it's every year is different when you do camps, and every summer is different. And sometimes the camp season depends on the snow and how the amount of snow you get and when you can start your camp. But over at Gwynn Park now, we've been running camp for a while over there. And typically at Gwynn Park, there's usually 4 or 5 weeks of camp, the Yellow Jackets camp. When I was at Spalding, we had 3 or 4 weeks of camp. And then typically every session varies. Usually when you're running camp, your biggest numbers are usually in the end of June, beginning of July, and then people start going on vacation. Smooth transition, honestly. Very smooth transition. First of all, people that know basketball know Gwynn Park has been a basketball mecca for years and years and years, going back into the 1960s. And I was fortunate enough to take over for Steve Matthews, who was there for a long time, who built an excellent program. So I walked into another situation in which there was a lot of talent. I think the biggest transition for me was teaching more than coaching, just being in the public school environment, without religion, without uniforms, with kids from varying backgrounds. And I really like it. I love teaching in Gwynn Park. I've taught ELSA in government there for the past 11 years. I'm the head of the social studies department at Gwynn Park currently, and I love teaching there. I love all the kids that I've connected with. We're a very, very community type school, so it's amazing how many people from the 70s and the 80s come back all the time. Basketball-wise, it was easy. It wasn't hard at all. Basketball is basketball. We had great players. We had players that were hungry. I think the biggest difference was just the number of people that came out for the team and the whole process of selecting the team.
And how was it different? There were
Well, when you were in a Catholic school, a lot of people kind of know, the student body really aren't really good players. And you have all the players up here that were recruited in.
Right.
So we wouldn't really have that many kids come out for the team, maybe 25 at the most. My first year at Gwynn Park, we had 70 kids come out for the varsity. So that process was a lot tougher, determining who should be on the team and who should not be on the team.
And you probably work less with the kids in public than private, so you may not know, the evaluation period is much more crucial in a short period of time in public, I assume.
Exactly. You're absolutely right, Mark. Just the amount of times that you can work with the kids was a big difference too. Yeah. So I thought we did a pretty good job. 2007 was my first year, and then in 2008 we ended up going to the state Final Four. I've always been a defensive coach, so when I got to Gwynn Park, we're trying to look for kids that could play defense, were good athletes, were coachable. Me being an educator, even to this day at Gwynn Park, we will not keep anybody in our program that is a bad apple, that can't behave themselves in the classroom, that's not a good student, that's not motivated, that doesn't represent the school. And I think the one thing that we've done at Gwynn Park is we've had players that have been a great example of the community that we are at Gwynn Park.
Tell me a little bit more about how you're able to use your teaching and the fact that you get to interact with these kids outside of basketball, how that's helpful in terms of building relationships and kind of getting to know the kids a little bit, beyond the basketball scene.
Absolutely. Even being a private school coach, and I was a teacher to many of our students. At Gwynn Park, I'm teaching sophomore government that all students in Maryland public schools have to take, and they have to pass an exit exam called the HSA. So I've taught probably 90% of our players over my 11 years.
Wow.
So it is phenomenal to get to know the students outside the basketball court, and especially at a younger age too. And I think it's really helped tremendously down the road in terms of getting college prep. My biggest thing as a head coach has always been the same, has always been making sure the players are in position to go to college, and if they're good enough to get a scholarship, and as importantly, to make sure that they're ready to compete as soon as they walk into college, not only on the court, but in the classroom and socially. And if you ask me, probably the thing I'm proudest about in my 30 years of coaching are the number of college graduates that we've produced and the quality of men that they have become. And having done this for a long time, I've got former players that are in every profession you can imagine, from coaching to being a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer. So it's just a tremendous feeling. I love coaching my players. And if you ask my players, they see a totally different side of me from Mr. Glick as of Coach Glick.
Tell me a little bit about your responsibility as a coach, or not your responsibility, but how you operate in terms of helping kids get from high school to college. I know the AAU coaches help a lot and help kind of facilitate that process and getting kids recruited. And I'm just curious how you approach that in terms of helping a kid get from high school to college, how much interaction you have with the colleges when you sit down with the kids to talk about the options, how influential you are in addition to the parents and the AAU coaches. Tell me a little bit about that.
It's a great question, Mark. The first thing that I've done in all my years of coaching basketball is we sit down with all of our freshmen and we explain to them immediately how they become qualified. When I was at Spalding and Pilati, every single one of our graduates qualify for a 4-year school except for one, and that's over a 13-year period. Coming into public school, it's a little bit different because we have a little bit of different type of students. So what we do is we sit down with all of our freshmen and we give them a seminar with their parents about core
This is
GPA.
all freshmen, like kids who have made the JV basketball team?
Yes,
Okay.
these are, and I actually do this with all my sophomores too.
Okay.
But I do it with all of our freshmen that make our JV basketball team, with our JV basketball team as a whole, and we talk about the core GPA, the core classes, how many core classes they need. We talk to them about standardized testing. Our school has put a tremendous emphasis on standardized testing, which I think our administration has done a great job with. We make all of the sophomores in the school take the PSAT. We advise all of our juniors at the end of their junior year to take the SAT and then also the ACT. In our environment, a lot of our students do better on the ACT than the SAT. And my number one thing that I try to get across to our student athletes is your core GPA. Your freshman and sophomore year, getting good grades. Instead of getting that C, go ahead and get that B or that A, because it makes it so much easier to qualify, especially in this day and age, taking the pressure off having to do well on the standardized test. And frankly, a lot of our student athletes, they just need a chance to get into college. Honestly, I had personally the lowest SAT scores in my college freshman class. Was not a great standardized test taker, but I graduated in 4 years. As far as talking to the coaches, I've been blessed and been a coach for a long time, and coaching is like any fraternity. It's a fraternity, so I'm very, very well networked in. I know many, many coaches, and my biggest thing is for the kids is to present options to them and their families, to let the players have and the family have a lot of options, and then they can narrow the choices down and make the best decision on where to attend. I will never tell a player where to go to school. My job, I think, is just to create the options. In this day and age, I think the AAU coach is a little bit more prominent than they were before. But, just case in point with Justin Faison. Justin was a tremendous player for us last year, and was a transfer from McNamara in the WCAC, and the perfect example of a kid who might not have been a star at McNamara, but was a star at Gwynn Park, and walked out with a full-paid scholarship to play at Elizabeth City State in the CIAA. So I think that, at our school, not only can we help them with, the recruitment in terms of coaches, but we can also highlight players. And sometimes players just need a chance to be highlighted and not have the fear of being subbed out of the game and be showcased, because it's very competitive on the private school level.
Tell me a little bit about Faison's process. He has burst on the scene as a junior, is one of the most dominant players in PG County as a senior. He has looks from various colleges. How does he come to that decision? What impact do you have on that decision? And where are you guys at right now with him about to enter his freshman year?
Yeah, first of all, of my hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players that I've coached, Justin was one of my favorite. Justin, first of all, took a chance to transfer to Gwynn Park, and he was an excellent student. And he walked into a team that was a very, very good team with four-year starters. And basically, he walked in and he was the cherry on top. And he walked in and he just became the point guard and was just so unselfish and just blended in with all the players. And we had a magical season in 2016 and won the region championship and went to the state Final Four and eventually lost to Newtown, who were the state champions. Then we lost everybody. And all of our players graduated, and the only player that we really had coming back that had played was Justin. And Justin was able to transform himself and take a bunch of younger, inexperienced players and take them under his wing and be a leader on and off the court to them. And, he had times where the defense is playing box and one, and they're double teaming him, and he could not have done a better job last year of being a leader to us. And I was so proud of our team last year because that team just got better and better and better and better. And we went out like soldiers. And, Justin ended up scoring 934 points in 2 years, at Gwynn Park. And I was just really, really happy to see him get a scholarship to Elizabeth City State. The final two schools were Salisbury and Elizabeth City State. And Salisbury and Andy Sachs and his staff did a tremendous job of recruiting Justin. But at the end of the day, I think Justin, wanted to play at the Division II level and, wanted to play in the CIAA. And, it's a, historical league for him to play at. And I think he'll do fantastic.
Switch gears a little bit. I want to talk recruiting with you. Recruiting is a very hot topic in the DMV, especially in PG County. There are tons of elite basketball players in PG County, and a lot of the private schools in the area get them to come to their schools, which can hurt your program because I'm sure you have players that live in the Gwynn Park jurisdiction who don't go to Gwynn Park.
Many.
I'm curious what you're allowed to do to combat that recruiting. You're obviously not allowed to recruit per se, but if there's a player that lives in your area that, say, a WCAC school is recruiting, I'm sure you're allowed to talk to them and give them a Gwynn Park pitch. Tell me about that situation.
Yeah, Mark, I think that I probably have a different perspective than a lot of the coaches in the area. I think very few coaches went from elite private schools to public schools, so I kind of went the other way around. A lot of guys go from public to private, like Glenn Furillo, a great friend of mine, did. So I look at it a little differently. I understand the dynamics of recruiting. And my biggest thing for somebody that lives in our district that has an interest in our school is to show them what we have to offer at Gwynn Park. And we have an excellent school. We have very good academics. We have an excellent AP program. very, very community school. So I just try to present, to the parents that, hey, look, you can get to where you want to get to coming out of a Prince George's County public school. There's been many people that have done that all the way up to the NBA. And then also, I've got experience, and we're going to coach you like it's a private school environment, and we're going to, from a strength and conditioning perspective, to the system that we run, to the what we're doing during practices. So for me, all I can do is present the option that Gwynn Park has and let the family make the decision. It's never a personal thing. I know that for a fact. Every family's trying to do the best thing for their child, and I can't be a hypocrite. I have 3 of my own sons, and I have 2 of my sons that are in Montgomery County Public Schools in the Sherwood district. I have a rising junior at Sherwood right now, and then I have a to-be senior, my middle child, that goes to DeMatha, and he went there because he wanted to be a top-level baseball player. He starts on the varsity in a great baseball program, and he's had a tremendous experience. So even me as a parent, I have 2 kids that are Montgomery County Public School products and one that's a WCAC product, and I think every situation is different for every kid.
Mike, anything else about recruiting that you think is relevant or important?
Yeah, I would just say, the last thing in terms of recruiting, one thing I think a lot of us public school coaches do, we let the student athlete know, hey, if you decide to go to another school and it doesn't work out for you, you got a home here. You can always come back home, be where you're supposed to be amongst your peers and finish your career here. And that's one thing, I think most of us public school coaches do. We let the players and the family know that they got a home, and there's going to be no hard feelings. If there's anybody right now in Gwynn Park's district legally that's at a private school and it's not working out and you want to come back home to Gwynn Park, we'd welcome you with open arms.
All right, Mike, tell me a little bit about school's about to start up very soon. How do you get ready for the basketball season? What are you allowed to do by the rules prior to, I think, November 15th is usually the first day of tryouts? What are you allowed to do between now and November 15th in preparation for the season, both basketball-wise and getting the kids in order academically?
Great question. First of all, big shout out to Governor Hogan. One thing I love is starting school after Labor Day. I grew up like that, so I love starting school after Labor Day. We'll get right into it. Basically, when we get back into school, the one thing we're permitted to do, permitted to do strength and conditioning with the players. So we'll do a lot of strength and conditioning. I've always been a big advocate of strength and conditioning, and I've been blessed in my years of coaching to have a strength and conditioning coach. The last 3 seasons, we've had Vincent Williams, and Vincent's been unbelievable. So usually what we'll do is we'll have a strength and conditioning coach to work out with our players on the track and in the weight room and stuff like that. And we let anybody that's a student in the school come out to that. And then we have open gyms. So by rule, we're allowed to have open gyms, not allowed to do any instruction. And the open gym has to be available to everybody and anybody inside the school. So at Gwynn Park, we'll have open gym, and we'll have 40, 50, 60 kids come out, and we'll just open up the gym and let the 9th and 10th graders hoop.
What open gym just means, like pickup games?
Yeah, just pickup games. Pickup games. We'll divide the 9th and 10th graders up, let them play against each other. Maybe bring in the 11th and 12th graders afterwards, or maybe split the courts up and let them play against each other. We have a lot of other sports in our school, so we can only do open gyms when the volleyball team, other sports are not using the gym. And it's a good avenue for us. We can just sit back as coaches and just watch everybody play with no instruction.
And evaluate talent. Try to pinpoint who's going to be on your roster.
Yep, exactly. Try to get an idea of what players can do and what they can't do. And, a lot of times the players will come up to us and, they'll ask us what we think, and we'll be open and honest with them. I think that, for me personally, I've always been, if people will tell you about me, academics first. So for me, the academics is the big component. A lot of players cut themselves by their behavior in class and by their grades. So one thing that we do with our players, we're constantly tracking them academically. We have a program called School Max, in which we can follow the players' grades. So what we'll do is we'll track the players' academic, and not only the first quarter, but all 4 quarters. And we'll let some players know if you don't, get your grades up and do what you're supposed to do, then you're not going to be in the program. Sometimes we'll intervene and we'll go with the players to the teachers and talk to the teachers, and the teachers can explain what the player's not doing academically. The one thing I've been proud of in my 11 years at Gwynn Park, we've practically lost nobody due to grades. We're on the kids academically. I think we've done a great job of a staff of identifying kids that represent the school academically, athletically, and most important behavior-wise too. I'm a big proponent of acting the right way in school too. You're a role model inside the school. Other students look up to you. Other students would love to be in your shoes, and you have to act like a role model. So for me, we have a player that's not a positive role model and they can't behave themselves. They can just go play somewhere else.
You're in your 5th basketball coaching stop, 3rd high school. Mm-hmm. How long should we expect to see you at Gwynn Park? What's next for you? I know you've alluded to you have children who are in high school now. In a couple of years, they'll be out of high school, so there won't be baseball games to go see every weekend. They will be, assumably not, living right here.
Right.
Does that open the door for you to go back to a private school? Would you ever want to go back to the college game? Curious where you're at with that.
That's a great question. I love Gwynn Park. I really do. I love it being a teacher, being a department head, and being a coach. So honestly, right now, I have no aspirations to leave Gwynn Park. I'm blessed with a great situation. However, honestly, I'm in a position in the next few years, my children will be in the college, and I'll have a lot more free time in my hands. I'll be an empty nester. So I'll probably be in a position where, I would be able to be a private school coach. So that is not something I'm going to rule out. I wouldn't rule out maybe one day going with one of my good friends and maybe being a low-level college assistant. But for right now, I'm not pursuing any other jobs. My resume still says 2006 on it. I've not updated in 11 years. And I love Gwynn Park, and I have every anticipation of being there for years and years and years.
Had some boneheaded plays. Marlon had a boneheaded technical. Coach Glick had his first technical in 4 years. Boneheaded technical. But you know what? We played through all that stuff because you guys are winners, man. Okay? Quickly giving it up, first of all, to the coaches. And the skill development that we did, how many times we worked on finishing, Mike controls, and man, there it is, Isaiah, for the win. Free throws, you missed a ton, but you made it when it counted. Coach Trey, I got to give you a major shout out. Did they fold?
Yeah,
Okay. The next thing, you listened. Everybody probably thought I was crazy going boxing one. What are you doing, man? Okay, but you listened.
Tell me a little bit about the state of PG County basketball, of DMV basketball, of Maryland MPSSA basketball. The shot clock was just adopted.
Yep.
You guys are in a new region that is ultra competitive, to say the least. Probably weren't too happy to see the teams in your section, in your region, but just quick thoughts on the state of Gwynn Park and DMV and Maryland and PG County basketball.
Yeah, we'll start with the big perspective, DMV. I mean, we're the mecca of basketball. I let everybody know that all the time. I think we have the best basketball area in the world. I think we have tremendous AAU programs and youth programs, tremendous high school coaches on every level. So I think we're the mecca of basketball, and I think that we're only becoming better as an area with basketball, with the DMV, and you could throw Baltimore in the mix too. So I think the state, as a region, we're phenomenal. Prince George's County basketball, I think we're in a very good place. We have tremendous coaches in the county. That's something a lot of people don't talk about. Man, we've got coaches in the county that are as good as any coaches I've coached against on any level, and I think that sometimes we don't get recognized with the outstanding role models and coaches we have in the county. I think the state of basketball in Prince George's County is exceptionally high. I think it's an environment where we have more and more kids going to private schools, so naturally we're not going to have teams as talented as maybe were 15 and 20 years ago, just because a lot of those players will go to private schools. But I think that what we have in our county is very, very competitive. Last season, for instance, we had a state finalist in all 4 of the regions. So I love coaching in the county. I love the friends that I've made and the coaches that I've coached against. As far as Gwynn Park goes, there's been a reshuffling every 2 years. We remained a 2A school, but a lot of our brethren have gone down to the 1A, Largo and Douglas. Other schools have gone to 1A. So our region has changed, where we've been in a region with a lot of schools in the SMAC in Howard County. We now got shipped up to the Baltimore region. So our region, being the 2A North, is by far the hardest region in the state in terms of public school basketball. And our section is brutal. We have Lake Clifton in our section. We have Dunbar in our section. We have the defending state champion Patterson in our section. Our section is brutal, along with us, Central and Crossland. So it's going to be very, very challenging for us. But you know what? We'll be right there in the mix like we are every year. We've been to 4 Final Fours in our 10 years as a staff together. In all 4 years we've been to the Final Four, we've lost to a Baltimore school in the state Final Four. So realistically, if we can get out, I think it does give us a better chance to actually win a state championship. And that's our goal at Gwynn Park. We've got a great storied basketball history. We have the second most state championships in the state of Maryland behind Dunbar. We have 10 state championships, but we haven't won one since 1998, and I believe that we have been to 13 Final Fours since 1988 and have not won one. So we're really, really close, and every year I've been, we got beaten by Baltimore. So that's the measuring stick. But I think that the private school recruitment in Baltimore isn't the same as DC. I think some of your top players in Baltimore stay at home because of financial restraints, and me having coached in that area, I understand public school basketball is a little different up there than it is in Prince George's County.
Like the shot clock has been adopted in Maryland State basketball.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I've never coached with a shot clock in high school, other than a few random games and tournaments. I haven't coached with a shot clock since 1993. I think one thing to be a good coach is you have to change with the times. I think that's one thing. I think that's something I've done a pretty good job of, changing with the times over 3 decades. So to me, I just look at it as another change in the game. I'm excited to have the shot clock. Personally, I think it's something that should have been in our game years ago. I mean, if the players are playing with the shot clock in college, how they don't play with it in high schools, beyond comprehension for me. So I'm embracing it, and I'm glad that we're going to have a shot clock. I've gone and talked to a lot of my brethren in the coaching fraternity, some private school coaches, and a lot of college coaches about the shot clock, and I think we're developing our own, philosophy and game plan at Gwynn Park, how we're going to implement the shot clock. With that being said, I've always been a strong believer of basketball as a game of feel, and I think every situation dictates something different. So I will not be set in stone about how I'm going to use the shot clock. I think a lot of it will go by game, quarter by quarter scenario. But believe me, I'm going to have to get some practice on using the shot clock manually, because we're going to be using that in practice a lot. I'm glad it's coming, honestly.
Mike, the AD that you work for is a basketball mom through and through. Linda Henson Hub has 2 sons that go to Gonzaga. Obviously, Prentice Hub, who's going to Notre Dame, who's one of the top players in the country. The fact that you get to work for an AD who is really a basketball person, talk about that relationship and kind of how helpful that is, that she really understands what's going on in the basketball landscape.
Oh my God, I'm blessed because I work for not only an AD but a principal who are basketball parents. Our principal, Dr. Tracy Miller's daughter, was a phenomenal. Daughters were both phenomenal players, but her one daughter was the SMAC Player of the Year. So my principal is a basketball parent of 2 female basketball players, and then our athletic director, Linda, one of my dear friends, is the mom of Prentice and Carlos, who are tremendous players for Steve Turnover at Gonzaga.
Mike, you've been in the game for a long time, got a lot of wins under your belt, coached a lot of elite players. Give me your top basketball memory.
Ooh.
You're getting inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, and you got a story to tell. Give me your top story that comes to mind.
Oh, wow, there's a lot of stories. Just in terms of game memories, I'd have to go with a good and a bad memory, because all coaches have good and bad memories. The bad memory, which I still have a hard time living down to this day, was the 1998 WCAC championship, in which our Pilates team was up 3 in American University Bender Arena in front of 7,000 raucous sold-out crowd, and Keith Bogans hit a 3-pointer with about 4 seconds left to send the game to overtime, and we were supposed to foul, but we didn't, and then we ended up losing in overtime by 1 in 1998. So that's, if I could go back in time and change anything in my 30-year career, I would change that moment in time, because we were so close to a WCAC championship at Little Old Pilates, and we were so deserving. We just came up so short to a legendary DeMatha team. In fact, that team for DeMatha finished 39-1. It was the most wins that legendary Morgan Wooten has had, in a year. Best basketball memory? God, there's so many to think of. But I think one of the most memorable games that I've been involved with was in 2011. We played at Oakland Mills in the region
This is when you were at
finals.
Gwynn Park.
I was at Gwynn Park. We played at Oakland Mills.
I was at that game.
You were at that game, so you remember. Unbelievable game, sold out crowd, sold out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
There were hundreds of people lined up. They couldn't get in.
Yup, the Greg Winnington, and I think Oakland Mills was undefeated.
Yep.
They were second ranked in the DMV, and we were predicted underdogs. And I'll never forget, we came out the opening tap and we held the ball, and we were down 9-0, and there were 2 minutes left in the first quarter, and we were still holding the basketball, and I can't even imagine the boos that we were receiving, what people were saying to us. But, our guys believed in the game plan, and they believed in slowing the tempo down. And then all of a sudden we worked our way back in the game, and I'll never forget, we were down 1 with under 20 seconds left. And Daniel Henry, we called him DJ, hit an and one off the glass to give us a 2-point lead, and we won that game, and we stormed Oakland Mills court. That was one of the best feelings I've ever had, to have a team believe in what we were preaching and what we were teaching, to hold the ball in the region finals down 9 to start the game and to get a victory. It was just unbelievable.
You guys had a bit of a rivalry with Oakland Mills at one point.
Yeah.
Didn't you play them in 3 out of 4 years in the regions or something like that?
We played Oakland Mills 3 straight years. We played
straight years.
Greg Whittington's sophomore, junior, and senior year. Sophomore year, we played them in the first round. We won a relatively handy game by more than 15 points. We were the better team, and Oakland Mills had a very, very young team. Then we played them Greg's junior year. They had an excellent team, and at that time, we were supposed to host the region championship, but at that time the game was played at Wise on a neutral court, and I think we lost our home court advantage, and that was one of the most memorable games I've ever had. We were down 9 points with 1:10 left, and our season was over, and our best player, Mike Hemsley, fouled out, and our team just made a remarkable comeback, and we got the game to overtime. Brandon Ford, who ended up having a 4-year career at Howard, ended up leading us in overtime along with Tion Barnes, and we ended up beating Oakland Mills by 2. And then Greg's senior year, we beat him at the game I just alluded to. But then they did come back 2 years after that and beat us by 30 in the first round at Oakland Mills, so they got a little payback. If you ask me for a criticism real quick,
tell people a little bit more about that, because it seems, when I was younger, when you were younger, it didn't really exist. And today it's become such a prominent business, and there's become many trainers who have really blossomed into, high profile people in the basketball world. Continue your thoughts with that.
Yeah, I would say as far as the training goes, the advice I would have for parents, just make sure you get a trainer who knows what they're doing. There are so many trainers out there that are clueless, and they're trainers because they can't be basketball coaches, and they're not good developer of talent, and all they're doing is stealing money. They're just taking money, and they're brainwashing the players and the parents. And I just think that there's a lot of guys out there that are doing personal training that simply don't know what they're doing. They're not developing the players at all. And then sometimes when we get those players back, they've actually digressed. They become worse players. However, there are some trainers, that are excellent and that know exactly what they're doing. And that really, it's money well spent. So I just, my thing is you get what you pay for. You really got to do some investigation. I had to do it with my own sons in terms of baseball training. The one thing that I would say in terms of personal training, I think that the best kind of personal training you can get as a high school player would be through your body. I think a lot of people develop personal trainers that just want to work with basketball and not in their body. What I've noticed through my career is the players that go to the highest level are the players that are the best athletes with the best bodies, with the best athletic ability. And I don't think a lot of high school players focus on their bodies and their eating patterns and their sleeping patterns. I think they focus more on just, elevation on their jump shot, following through and their stance and stuff like that. And all that's fine and dandy, but if you're not a tremendous athlete, you can only go so far in basketball. So I would, encourage people to go out and find a personal trainer that's going to focus on the body as well as, the fundamental basketball game.
How do you find a good personal trainer for basketball versus a bad one? I mean, you had some pretty strong comments about, about that whole situation, but how do you vet these guys? How do you what's the differentiating factor?
I think first of all, I can just use the model that I use with my sons through baseball. You have to first of all see the product. Who came out of that program? What are some of the players that went to college? That maybe went to the pros, and then see if you can talk to the parents on the phone to get their input on the personal trainer. The second thing, go and watch a personal training session. See what's being done, because what you're visualizing doesn't lie. The next thing,
If you do that, what do you look for? What constitutes being good at that versus not being good at that?
I would say first of all, see if the trainer knows what he's doing. Okay. See if he's giving you proper fundamental, approach to the game. Second of all, I would say every child's different, so every trainer must be different. You have a lot of trainers that just do the same regimented program, and that regimented program might be great for your kid, but not for mine. So I think what I would ask the personal trainer is, I want you to assess my child's game and tell me, where does my child need to improve, and what are you going to do to help my child improve? I think that's a big thing. And I think the other thing is, honestly, talk to high school coaches. I think a lot of high school coaches are familiar, or AAU coaches are familiar with the personal trainer. In all honesty, if you're playing for a top level AAU program, you're playing for a really good high school or middle school program, you really don't need a personal trainer, because you get a lot of your training through those programs. And I think the other thing is, I think a lot of kids don't want to put the work in on their own. And I'm from a generation where you'd go outside and you'd shoot on your own, and you'd work out on your own, and you'd run on your own, and lift on your own. And I think sometimes what kids need to do, they need to go out and put the work in on their own with nobody around, with no supervision. I think that would help them a lot, to be honest with you. But I think everything's so supervised now. We call it helicopter parenting. It's the same thing with basketball, helicopter coaching, where players always have somebody around them criticizing them. And I know my best development as a basketball player came through playing pickup basketball.
Mike, give me the all Mike Glick team.
Oh.
You can either break it up in terms of the 3 high school stops and do a team for each, or a first and second team for all 3 schools combined. But just if you had to pinpoint the all Glick team, where would you start?
Oh my God, that's the toughest question I've had. Oh my God, I don't even know where to start with that one.
Let's start at Gwynn Park and work our ways back.
Gwynn Park all Glick team. Wow, that's a hard one too. Okay, we're going to start at, we're going to have to say class of 08, my backcourt. We're going to have to say Sean Thomas, and we're going to have to say Harold Washington. Best backcourt I've had at Gwynn Park. Unbelievable. Sean, Morgan State grad, played at 2 NCAA tournaments at Morgan, and Harold Washington had an outstanding career at Canisius. So that would have to be my backcourt at Gwynn Park. My four-man would probably have to be Mike Hemsley. Mike Hemsley played on our state finalist team and scored 30 in the state finals. Was a tremendous player, ended up playing at Adams State. That's where he finished up. Great player. I'd have to say Tion Barnes and Brandon Ford. They were great players in the 1011 era. Brandon ended up being a tremendous player at Howard University. But I've been blessed to have just some tremendous players at Gwynn Park, and have had just tremendous fond memories. But those would be some of the guys just off the top of my head that I would mention, and there's many guys that I've left out, I'm sure, that are definitely deserving to be on that list. Spalding, that's a really hard one. I mean, first and foremost would have to be Rudy Gay, without question. Rudy is still the best player that I've coached on any level, and one of the best people that I've coached. So Rudy would be the captain of that team at Spalding, without question. Landy Thompson. Landy Thompson, I only coached for 1 year. Ended up being one of the all-time leading scorers at Mount St. Mary's, and Landy was the Baltimore Catholic League MVP in 2002 and led us to a BCL title. What a wonderful 1 year that was with Landy. Probably, maybe the best point guard I've ever coached, Derek Snowden. I only had Derek for 1 year in 00, but oh my God, what a tremendous player Derek Snowden was. And what a tremendous leader. Probably the best leader that I've had on any team that I've ever coached. His leadership ability was phenomenal. I had to say Tremayne Robinson, my unbelievable rebounder and finisher at the rim. And Tremayne was a class of 00 player and was a great player for us. And I'm going to have to put some other players in there. I had a guy named Marquise Sullivan, who ended up being the all-time leading three-point shooter at Loyola, for a good friend of mine named Jimmy Patsos. Marquise was an 05 graduate. I had two other 05 graduates that played Division I ball. Justin Castleberry, that played in two NCAA tournaments in Bucknell when they had their legendary runs, and Justin's making a lot of money now. Lawrence Dixon, he played an NCAA tournament for Ralph Roland at Holy Cross. But those were some of our standout players that I had at Spalding, amongst the many that I did not mention. Oh, at Pilati, wow. I could just name my whole class of '98 team if you wanted me to be honest. But the top two would be David Day Morris, one of the only 4-year starters I've ever coached in high school. David played 4 years of varsity basketball in the WCAC and was an unbelievable point guard, a 4-year starter at Dayton, along with his sidekick, Nate Green, who was also a 4-year player at Dayton. Nate was a power forward, maybe one of the best power forwards I've ever coached, and had a really good professional career in South America, and now is actually back in Dayton and mentoring a lot of youth. But they were two tremendous players that I had. I'm going to have to mention, of course, Jarrett Jack, with a long, illustrious career in the NBA. And I only had an opportunity to coach Jarrett for 1 year in '99. But he was a sophomore, but you could just see him growing day by day. And it's just so proud of the player that Jarrett became. In that same year, I had Levi Watkins, who ended up having an excellent career at NC State, and now is a father, and been an assistant basketball coach in NC State and Arizona State for a long time. Really proud of the man that he's become. And I had a guy named Khalif Watson, who ended up being a player at Miami for 2 years. I wish I would have had a chance to coach those guys more than 1 year. And then the last player would have to be my best shooter that I had at Pilati, Austin Roland, without question. I mean, Austin was an unbelievable knockdown shooter. He's class of '99, and he had a great career at Delaware for Mike Bray, and then went to Lehigh his senior year, and was a Patriot League Player of the Year, and played over 11 years in France and Germany, and now is an assistant coach at Lehigh. But that's just some of the players that I coached at Pilati. I know I'm missing some.
Mike, it's been a pleasure catching up with you. Really appreciate you letting me into your house and getting to know you a little better. If there's anything else that you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
Now, I first of all have to say that I would never have done things in coaching that I've done without my assistants. We haven't really touched upon that, but I've got to just say that I've been blessed to have the best assistants that any coach could have, and I could have never accomplished anything in basketball without my assistants. From my assistants now, I have phenomenal assistants. Spencer Way's been my JV coach for the last 9 years at Gwynn Park, and he's an ex-Division I player and a Gwynn Park product, and I could have never done anything at Gwynn Park that we've achieved without Spencer and his development of the players in the JV level. Brandon Young, another Gwynn Park grad, that's been my assistant for 9 years. And then I had two former players that played for me at Gwynn Park, Kevin Miles and Justin Mays, that are helping me out now. So just the assistants that I have now, I've just been so blessed to have. And then going back to my days in the Catholic League, I've been blessed from having guys like Steve Turner, who's just done remarkable things at Gonzaga, being my assistant, to a guy like Andy Sachs, who's been to 3 NCAA Division III tournaments and has got an unbelievable program at Salisbury, being my assistant. My right-hand man for 13 years was Josh Pratt, who I coached and then was my JV coach and my assistant all through my periods in the Catholic Leagues. Josh just took over at Indian Creek, but he's just an impeccable coach. Towson Catholic, and most recently Huntingtown. Sean Whalen, who's now an assistant coach at Howard University. Kevin Nickelberry was my assistant for 1 year at Pilati. He was the head coach at Howard University. Keith Cotrere, former Laurel great head coach, assistant at Howard University, played for me in college. I've just been simply blessed to just have some unbelievable assistants to help make my career what it is. I know I'm leaving out a bunch of people, but I've got to put a word in about my assistants. As terms of a platform and anything that I could say real quickly just on my feelings, I'd like to talk to the parents real quick. And again, I'm a parent of 3 sons, and I have kids that have played, and I know what it's like to be a parent, watching your sons play, watching them coached by others. I would just have to say my strongest feeling is there's not one person that coaches your son that doesn't have his best interest in mind, especially on the high school level. All of us high school coaches are the same. We have your child's best interest in mind, we see your child a lot more than you see your child. We see your child in practice every single day. And I don't think there's any coach out here in the DMV, AAU, or high school coach that would want to lose a game on purpose to favor another child. A lot of times we have to make tough decisions as coaches, and I think a lot of parents think it's personal, and it's not personal. It's not personal. I think that coaches, see players play every day, and they try to put their teams in position to win. And I think the one thing that I've seen change, in my 30 years of coaching, is the role of the parents. And it's, to me, oftentimes, I'm not meaning this from my Gwynn Park parents, but it's oftentimes, parents don't embrace the process, and it's a process. And you can see it, through guys, coming up and playing. Sometimes you have to pay your dues, and you're not going to be the superstar player. And I think parents want instant gratification. That's simply not going to happen. And there's a process. And I think a lot of times parents want to get away from that process. And that's why we see all the transferring going on. And the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And it's just, hurts me to my core to see parents who are supposed basketball experts that don't know anything about the game, that sit up in the crowd and want to coach. And they don't know that much. They don't see what's going on behind closed doors. Parents oftentimes will say, I've heard this to a lot of my other friends, my son makes a mistake and you sub him out, but that child makes a mistake and you don't sub them out. You're not fair. Parents have to understand that it's just like in the NBA. Different players have different leeway. You can go to the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron James is getting more leeway to make a mistake than other players. And that's just what it is. I think what coaches do, coaches go by what they see every day in practice, and they go by consistency. The other thing is, last thing I'll say, what does your child do well? What does your child do well, and what does your child not do well? And I think a lot of times some players don't do anything well and anything bad, and they're mediocre or average at everything they do. A lot of times coaches want to know what the players bring to the table. Where if I need a really, really good rebounder, that child's going to get in the game because I know they're going to rebound. And I think a lot of times coaches go simply by what they know they're going to get, when a player enters the game. So, I would just say that it's never personal to the parents. I think coaches have a tough job. One of the toughest jobs. Most parents, if I came in and criticized you on your job in front of your peers, would like to see how you react. And I'm not talking about my Gwynn Park parents, because we have phenomenal parents. I'm just talking about parents in general. So I would say that's my little platform. That's the one thing I've seen change over my 30 years of being a basketball coach, the role of the parents.
Question I've asked every coach during this series: if there's a pickup basketball game tomorrow, of all of the coaches in the DMV, who is your first pick?
That might be the toughest question I've ever had. I would not even begin to know how to answer that question. I'll throw some names out. Okay, we're going to say assistant coaches first, because I'm going to cheat. Being somebody that's lived in Albany for a long time, that went through the OBGC program with his children, Walt Williams. So Walt would have to be the best coach that's out there, because Walt was a tremendous player. I know Walt's an assistant coach, but he's done a tremendous job coaching. If you're just talking about current coaches, I know I'm going to miss people, but I'll have to name Mike Jones right off the top. I remember watching Mike play at DeMatha during those legendary teams. Mike was a tremendous player, so I think Mike would be somebody. I'm going to go a little old school and mention a former Robert E. Perry grad, Dan Harwood. A lot of people didn't remember Dan as a player, but Dan was a great player. He played on one of Rick Pitino's first teams at Boston University, so I'd have to mention Dan. Staying in PG County for a minute, I have to mention Rob Gardner. Rob was a tremendous player at Delaware, somebody that I saw play from afar, and a tremendous coach, but a very, very great player. But I'm sure it wouldn't be Mike Glick, I know that, but I'm sure there's a lot of other coaches that were great players, and I'm forgetting right now off the top of my head.
All right, Mike. Well, that wraps it up. Again, we really appreciate it. It's been great rapping with you here for the last hour, and we look forward to seeing what Gwynn Park has to offer this upcoming season.
I'd like to say one last thing. I want to thank you, Mark, for your contribution that you've made with basketball in the DMV. I've gotten to know you over the past decade, and it's been a blessing. And you have done nothing but help a lot of kids in this area and a lot of coaches in this area. And I want to thank you. You don't get the praise that you deserve, and you've gotten kids scholarships without even knowing it. And you've gotten kids visibility without even knowing it. And I've had so many college coaches contact me about watching videos on CapitolHoops.com and pieces that you've put together and help get kids scholarships. So thank you for what you've done, and I appreciate you taking the time to put the coaches out there, honestly, to put us out there and to give us a little bit of time to shine. And your contributions for basketball in the area have been tremendous. I just want to personally just thank you and all you've done, and I know all the other coaches and players echo my sentiments. So thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Much appreciated.